Now we're going to talk about the font called Univers. And this was a font that is used in a lot of logos, such as the UNICEF logo. Also, sometimes is used on keycaps, which is interesting because we don't usually think about what font is being used on those. But in the PowerBook G4 on the Apple computers, they definitely used this font. It is also has been used in Audi speedometers, dashboard graphics. So if you're ever wondering about, what font do they use for the numbering, look no further and you'll see that this font appears in a lot of different places. It's got a couple different weights from ultra light to ultra or extra black. The font is the Univers font is designed by Adrian Frutiger in 1954. It is a neo-grotesque typeface, and it has, yeah, like I said before, it has so many different weights to it, and this table here kind of helps to highlight that as you go through. There's on the lower left side right here, we have basically a heavier weight um, as well as um, different width. It's definitely not condensed over here the way that it is when you look up here into this upper right corner. So it's sort of this flow chart that is displaying that. So the different suffixes for the width and position go from ultra extended oblique, extended oblique, normal oblique, condensed oblique, and ultra condensed. So so many different new terminologies to describe that, and you just kind of have to know what you're looking for because they only mean something within the certain scale, of course. It's almost like sizing and clothing. Like this was meant to develop a standard and classification. However, I'm not sure that this was always understood by everybody who was in the manufacturing of the typeface or in the implementation. Um, but yeah, I just thought it was such a great idea to sort of standardize this. Um, if it had become more widely used, then it would definitely have helped to specify um, different weights and widths. So it may or may not be obvious that this font looks a whole lot like Helvetica. That's definitely a common perception. Another font that looks similar would be called Folio, and these were all released in 57, so it's completely understandable if you confuse them a little bit. um, One more thing before we move on to the next slide is that what I think is cool about having all these different widths and thicknesses is that you could use the same font for an entire poster, an entire document. You have such a range of different styles and weights, but it kind of allows for some sort of consistency within the document if you're using some form of Univers. So I don't know, it has its use if you're looking for something like that. I know a lot of times these days it's very common to mix fonts, especially ones that may not typically seem like they go together. So it just kind of depends on what your design ethic is. So this is an image by the artist Josef Müller Brockmann. This was a project done by this man who was an illustrator, and it is called the Accident Gauge. This was installed on the Paradeplatz in Zurich, where it basically was an infographic showing the numerical summary of each week's automobile-related accidents and deaths. The font used as accidents grotesque, and the material being shown is that of statistic nature. So basically, the font that was used was actually very appropriate because they're a bit understated and they're giving very blunt, very dry information. So it worked well, just sort of, stating the facts. Here it is. So below the titles of the deaths, we have these like numerical gauges underneath, and this is definitely reminiscent of the constructivist designs in the 1920s. This poster here is by Armin Hoffman. It's called Giselle from 1959. This was designed for a theater in Basel, Switzerland, and this artist Hoffman was trained by Ernst Keller, and he was a professor of graphic design at the Schule für Gestaltung. So in this image, you're seeing the text running down in a vertical fashion, and the image itself is notably whimsical in nature, and it's not quite following the unofficial rules of the Swiss style. This image almost has a magazine cover quality to it, where you're seeing the text almost zeroing in on the image. There's sort of almost an overlap here, and it's a little bit unsettling. You're seeing this kind of unified thing, um, with with no clear separation. The image is sort of taking up the whole background, and if you look at it on its side, you can see that the dot on the eye here is very separated. It's very raised up from the eye. So this was sort of meant to play in with the rest of the photographic image. There's a lot of soulfulness in this photograph. The black and white kind of shows that there's really no need for color in this image to give it that whimsical quality. There's also a lot of balance, which kind of reflects the dancing. There's balance both in a literal and physical sense. And yeah, I also like the sense of motion that you see in the photograph as well. Kind of just a beautiful state, kind of this very static text mixed with a very expressive dancing image. So a juxtaposition of something very hard edged with the font right here, and something with a little bit more grayscale, a little bit more softness, and sort of ephemeral image. I also think the placement of the eye sort of follows the 2/3 rule, and it really provides a great focal point for the image. So I think that there's a lot of genius in this poster right here. By the artist Emile Ruder, and he had a lot of passion in the field of typography and design. He had very systematic methodology, and his idea, his aspiration was to promote, quote unquote, the good and the beautiful in word and image, and to open the way to the arts. He was hugely instrumental in the use of the Swiss style, or the International Typographic Style. He was a pioneer of the sans serif typefaces, and he also used a page grid for structure in producing asymmetrical layouts. So he was the inventor of the grid. Comes down to it, the Swiss style was defined by the use of sans serif typefaces, page grids for structure, and the resulting images from the grids would be asymmetrical, but very square, very compartmentalized. And the benefit of these grids was to have a framework that defined the number of columns, the padding of the columns, and the margins of the columns. And the idea is that these would be very clear and logical patterns to help organize a wide range of dynamic content scenarios. And also alleviating the micromanaging content level design with a very defined structure for organizing the content. So just very nice template to use. So this could be customized and used very quickly and reproduced. That is a poster for an exhibition of French tapestries called Moderne Französische Knuftepische. And this is a perfect example of how the font, the lettering, can create its own abstract image. And the overlapping letters are meant to look like woven textiles. So in a sense, the letters are woven together, much like the tapestries. So it's a very abstract, minimalist design that still conveys the message. And the last image we'll talk about in this lecture is called Typographica #1, new series by Hubert Spencer, who was a modern English designer. And he really wanted to promote the geometric abstract style in England. And he was definitely pointing out the Swiss point of view of design up until the 1990s. So he was very different in his interests from the other people in England at the time. He was into the avant-garde. It's created as a photogram, which was a type of image created without a camera. So it was a sense of photography using light and made in the lab and darkroom, but not using an actual camera device. This was a journal that he founded called Typographica. His influences included Dadaism, Futurism, and Surrealism. The trade journal was very important because it addressed graphic design as contributing to popular culture rather than being used just for business. About the Swiss style. Thank you for listening.